Today is Mother's Day, and in honor of that, I suppose I should talk about something related to the topic of mothers. So let's start by looking at a movie simply titled Mother. No, not that one. That one is way too mainstream for this channel. No, I'm talking about the 2009 dramatic mystery out of South Korea, directed by Bong Joon Ho, who would later take the Academy by storm with his hit film Parasite. This particular movie tells the story of a desperate mother as she searches for a killer who framed her son for a horrific murder of a young woman. Before we get into it, I should give the standard warning that even though we are mainly looking at this movie with a specific focus on the mother in it, there will be spoilers for the story as well. So if you have any interest in going in unspoiled, I would recommend going and watching the movie and then coming back to finish this video. For my non-spoiler thoughts, I will say that this movie rivals Parasite, which is one of the movies that I hold in the highest regard. It is a slow burn, but if you are a fan of slower-paced mystery thrillers, then this movie is a definite must-watch. Now let's get into specifics. From the first scene in the movie, we see the dedication of a mother and how parenthood can change one's priorities. Focused solely on her child, the mother cuts herself, and yet all of the concern is towards her son. Her own pain is irrelevant to mother, as she feels any pain that her son might experience far more. Throughout the movie, we see the great lengths that mother will go to in order to defend and coddle her son. I suppose it's just a part of being a parent to want to shield your children from any pain in the world that they might face. I know growing up, we had quite a bit to face in the world around us, and yet my own mom quite often drove our attention towards more joyful experiences. Even when those serious discussions had to take place during major events such as 9/11, she never seemed to let those events overshadow the simpler things in our day-to-day lives. And it's not as if my mom was without concerns or pain. She had a great deal of burden placed on her. In a split household, she alone had to balance raising 2 children, working to afford a place to live as well as food, and going through the process of furthering her own education in the hopes of greater opportunities down the line. All of this while also shielding us from the horrors of the world in which we were growing up. During the course of this movie, it's revealed that the reason for this coddling is heavily influenced by a major decision mother made when her son was only 5. In order to protect him from the pain and suffering within a life of poverty, mother gave her son a bottle of insecticides so that they might both be able to leave the world behind and be happy together in heaven. Unfortunately for mother, the poison was not strong enough, and instead her son was left with impaired brain function. It would seem that perhaps mother feels guilty for the way her son's life has turned out, and her desperation to protect him stems more from that guilt rather than any inherent motherly instinct. My own mom never did anything to this degree of severity while we were growing up. A few years ago, I had a conversation with my mother. I got the confirmation that there was a good deal of regret in her. Not regret of the children she had, but regret in the way in which we were raised and some of the parenting decisions that were made. We had been introduced to movies, books, and shows which were intended for audiences well beyond our age. When we were very young, our parents went through a divorce, which resulted in us having to split time between both parents' households, and we moved to a town in which we were more likely to face discrimination while growing up. Mother goes through the movie desperate to find evidence of her son's innocence, even going so far as to break the law herself by committing murder. But here's the thing. Her son is not innocent. He did, in fact, commit the crime he was charged with. Despite wanting to see the good in her son, mother comes to the realization that her son has grown into a flawed man who has made many mistakes of his own. Once I reached my own teen years, I had a great deal of resentment and angst within me. For a long time, I resented the situation I was forced to grow up in, and the blame in my mind mostly fell onto my mom. I was angry at the fact that I had to split time between 2 houses, which made it difficult to ever truly feel like I had a home. I was angry at the fact that we did not have some of the luxuries that other kids living in a house with 2 incomes had. I was angry at the fact that I was forced to go to another house where I felt like a secondary child from a failed attempt at a family. And I was angry that I was sent there with seemingly no arguments from my mom. That resentment started small, but with poking and prodding, it grew, to the point where I felt as if I was unwanted. The times that I was away from the house must feel like a holiday. There was so much less that my mom had to worry about without children in the house, and therefore it must result in more happiness. Once I became a teenager, that resentment hit a boiling point, and as much as I now regret it, I can't take back the fact that a majority of it was aimed squarely at my mom. In my mind, I had decided that if I truly was such a burden to her, then I would make her hate me. Looking back on my childhood now that I have had time to reflect and work on these issues that I have through therapy, I cringe at the way I acted. I can understand the desire to protect your children from any sadness, and in order to do that, you make decisions based on what you think is the best option available at the time. We can only work with the information and the resources provided to us. I can understand the decision to go through with a divorce, because living in a house where there is constant anger and yelling will only teach children that this is the way a house should be. I can understand wanting children to have both their mother and their father present in their lives. I can understand moving to a safer area with better schooling to provide more opportunities for your children. I have grown to see the flaws in my reasoning that I had at that time. I may not have had a consistent house that I stayed at all the time, but my mom provided us with a family. While we split our time between 2 houses, she pushed to ensure that we would always attend Easter and Thanksgiving with her and our cousins. We may not have had cable or the newest video games, but my mom would take us to see big movies. We would take smaller day trips, go camping as a family, and we would go to the library to pick up things that we could enjoy. Now that I have to balance bills of my own, I can understand the difficulty of working off of a single income. And one thing I can appreciate is that even with a more restrictive budget, my mom never left us with a childhood empty of joys. Letting go of anyone in your life is difficult. I have had to experience it multiple times now, and the thought of willingly allowing your child to set out on their own, I can only imagine would be that much more difficult. My mom had to do that with us every single week. On top of that, I definitely put her through the ringer once I reached that angst. She allowed me to stop attending services once I stopped feeling comfortable with the church, which must have been terrible as someone who holds those beliefs. I fought to change schools, which would result in even less time at her house, and she agreed to that because she wanted what was best for me. Over the course of my life, I must have broken her heart so many times that I wouldn't even know where to start counting. We had a book growing up called Love You Forever by Robert Munsch. My mom used to love reading it to me when I was little. It follows a mother and her child as they both go through the process of aging. I think the simplicity of it is comforting to think about as a parent. No matter what happens in life, as long as you're alive, a parent will see you as their baby. While unleashing my anger in my teen years, I took our copy of that book, and I tore through every single page. And looking back on the event, I'm filled with disgust. I'm not even sure if my mom actually knew that it happened. For all I know, she thinks that copy of the book still exists in one of the totes filled with stuff from our childhood. At this point, I still don't believe that I deserve any type of forgiveness for the things that I put her through growing up. My mom would be more than justified if she were to watch this video and decide that enough is enough. I have never fully apologized for any of this, and truth be told, I've never been comfortable with raw emotions, so I still don't think I'm strong enough to make any sort of apology to her face. I can only hope that this video might be enough to even slightly redeem me. I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my mommy you'll be.